Hello my dear friends, you're in the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 4th of February of 2024. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And first we're going to talk about Avdiivka, because the most important and the most interesting updates are coming from this territory. First we're going to discuss the situation on the eastern flank of Avdiivka, where the Russians are storming the Ukrainian positions inside the filtration station, that Ukrainians still hold this territory. And if you remember, during the previous update we were talking that the Russians somehow managed to cross the N20 road and to enter the forest that, let's say, lays behind the filtration station. So once again, according to some Russian sources, by the morning of the 4th of February of 2024 of the local time, the Russians managed to cross the N20 road and to establish control over something like this. And during the day, we got the first geolocated confirmation of Russian progress. On this video, for example, we can see the video was published by 110th Brigade. We see the FPV drone strikes against the Russian forces on this side of the N20 road. There are a significant number of Russian stormtroopers and infantry who were trying to dig in deeper in the trenches along the N20 road. So now we have geolocated confirmation of Russian progress. We will adjust the map before the next video, and of course we're gonna make additional posts on Telegram channel showing the progress of the Russian army. This is significant advance, and furthermore I'll remind you that at the same time the Russians are trying to push and attack the Ukrainians from the south and using the infantry and armored vehicles. Of course, now we understand the main Russian plan, and the plan is to encircle the Ukrainian forces in filtration stations, to meet forces, the southern and the northern forces somewhere in the middle, and to collapse completely this flank. Obviously, the Ukrainians are not planning to wait when this happens. Obviously, very soon, maybe the Ukrainians have already started, they will start retreating and withdrawing their positions to the central part. Very likely that the Ukrainians have already done this, because it's too dangerous to continue keeping their forces here, so they will move back. And this is the update about the southeastern part. Now we're moving to the central part, probably the most important updates of the previous 24 hours. Let's start from the beginning, because before we move into the most important geolocations and updates, it's better to discuss how it started. First updates we start receiving from Ukrainian sources by the name of Yuri Butusov. He is Ukrainian propagandist, he is the head of Ukrainian sources and so on, Telegram sources, news sources and so on. And if you don't know who is him, I'll remind you that he was one of the first men who was talking about the critical situation of the Ukrainians in Tsarskaya Khota, when the Russians made let's say landing operation, that special operation with the pipe. He was one of the first who published this update in the Ukrainian segment of the internet and Telegram. So he was like the voice, he's like the voice of Avdiivka from Ukrainian side. If he knows, he thinks that it's time to start panic, he's the first one who will do this. So today he started reporting that the Russians managed to penetrate the Ukrainian defense belt and to enter the industrial zone, and he was talking about the northeastern part. So he was talking about this territory. First, I missed that piece of news. It was because this update was published let's say at 1 p.m. of the local time. So I supposed and I thought that he was basically repeating update that we have already discussed during the previous days, that the Russians managed to bypass this residential area and to enter the streets of, let's say, Tolstoy, Zaliznichny line. So first I thought that he was talking about the thing that we have already discussed. So that's why I bypassed this news and start searching for more details and updates about the situation on the ground. But later we got a very important details and very important update from another Russian, let's say, military journalist, about the situation on the ground. And he reported that the Russians managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt and to develop significant results all over the front line. And according to him, according to the Russian military journalist who works and operates on this area, the Russians managed to break through the Ukrainian defense belt along two streets. The Russians were developing their offensive operation along two streets. The first one is Zaliznichny line. This is the first street. The second street the Russians were moving is Frunze line. This is the Frunze line. This is it. And according to him, the Russians who were attacking from this direction managed to dig in deeper along Radianskaya Street. So this is the first Russian progress according to that military journalist, and according to him this is the, let's say, the progress of the first direction of Russian attack, and this is the I'm talking about. So somehow, and not somehow, we understand how the Russians bypassed the tree lines, enter Avdiivka from this part, and also another attack was taking place something like this, and using these two roads of attacks the Russians entered the streets, and this is exactly what we were talking in the previous video. But his post consists of two parts, and the second part is very interesting. According to the second part, the forces of 115th Brigade of National Guard, it's special forces, in the Russian they call Spetsnaz, entered Avdiivka from the east by passing the Blue Lakes. So what is Blue Lakes? This is Blue Lakes, and according to him, the Russian special forces, Russian Spetsnaz, managed to break through to make a very, let's say, deep attack, very long attack, and to enter Avdiivka from this territory as well. So this is the second update, this is the second part of his post. And this is not the end. And according to him, according to information of this Russian military journalist, the Russians currently are moving and heading in direction of Donetskaya Street, and that the Russians are about to enter this line. So according to him, he's saying there is a dynamic, and not like this. He was saying that the Russians managed to enter from the north, from the east, by bypassing the Blue Lakes from two sides, and the Russian forces of 115th Brigade of National Guard Spetsnaz managed to continue attack further in direction of Donetsk Street, and if dynamic continues, the Russians will be able to cut the main supply road that Ukrainians used to support their forces in the central and the eastern part. And as we discussed in the previous videos, the main Ukrainian supply roads goes along Industrial Ave, this is the first line, and they have some possibilities to support their forces using the tree lines with the infantry, maybe some cars and so on. But once again, we got today another geolocation. The Russians established complete aviation control, artillery control over this territory. Every day the Russians are sending significant number of FAPs, artillery strikes, Krasnopol strikes, everything they have to cut supply and support of Ukrainian forces in the central and the eastern part. To tell the truth, everything reminds me complete collapse, and everything reminds me the cauldron, and that Ukrainians are no longer able to do anything with this. So if updates of that military journalist is correct, then that means that this territory that I will mark right now with the blue cloud is the gray zone, and this is the area of active clashes between Russian and Ukrainian army. The fighting is ongoing everywhere, in every single building, for every single territory, and this line, this part of Avdiivka, is already under complete Russian control. So this is update as of 4th of February of 2024 of 8 p.m. of the local time. So this is the situation on this area. Furthermore, the Ukrainians understand that situation is critical, and not just and the thing is developed the following way. First of all, today for the second time probably, or maybe the third time since the beginning of the special military operation, the Ukrainian sources published the video of Abrams, and when talking about this post, this video was published by the official Ukrainian some channels. They're saying that this Abrams was made, this video was made somewhere in Donetsk region that is under Ukrainian control. So that means that Abrams, that Ukrainians, that situation is so critical in Donetsk direction, so the Ukrainians were forced to redeploy their Abrams exactly to this territory to somehow slow down the Russians, and maybe to reinforce their forces there, and to stop the further Russian progress and further Russian Ukrainian collapse. Additional sources reported that the forces of 92nd Battalion of 107th Territory Defense Brigade that recently was redeployed in direction of Avdiivka to support 110th Mechanized Brigade started strike, not even their relatives and their parents, their friends, wives, mothers, fathers, when they found out that the soldiers of this battalion was sent to Avdiivka, start striking in their own towns, and it forced the Ukrainians to stop the redeployment and to try to find another solution how to stabilize the area in Avdiivka. Another important updates are coming from the former air defense base, also from the same military journalist Marat Khairulin. He also provided us details about the clashes in this area, and according to him, the Russians continue advancing and continue development of their offensive operation along the tree lines, and they managed to get these territories. So they bypassed the intersections of road, and currently they're trying to dig in deeper. Furthermore, he also reported that the Russians a few days ago, maybe weeks or before, managed to enter a former air defense base, and according to him, part of the base, part of former air defense base is under complete Russian control. So, and the Ukrainians currently more or less controls just this part, as we discussed, and the situation more or less correspond to the reality, and this is the current situation. And as you can see, the Russians are moving further, and also they're going to start the active ground operation in the final part of this area as well. So this is the situation about Avdiivka. We expect more geolocations and updates from this territory. We will adjust the map in the very near future. And now let's move further to the not to the southern part, but to Novogrodovka. This area, Mykolaiivka, Novogrodovka. Currently, this is the main logistic hub of Ukrainians. There are a few cities like Pokrovsk, Mirnograd, Selidovo, Novogrodovka. This is the reserves area, ammo area, deep ammo depots area, warehouses, and so on. And today the Russians published very interesting video. On this sense, we can see how the Russians were bombing the Ukrainian positions. The source of this video reported that that was attack of multi-launch rocket systems, but this is not multi-launch rocket systems, because if it was multi-launch rocket systems, we would see the rockets flying in this area, like multi-launch rocket system. Regarding it, it's like Tornado S or another different type of weapon. From another perspective, this is not a FAB as well. This is not FAB because there are too many explosions, and if we're talking about FAB, usually it's 4, maybe 2, 4, 1, but as you can see, there are a lot of explosions in this area, and they are very heavy. So that's why, based on the geolocations, based on this video, I made the conclusion that the Russians start using Koalitsiya SV, new artillery system on Donetsk direction. If we calculate the distance between the those area of Russian heavy bombing in this area, and let's say possible positions of Koalitsiya SV somewhere here, some behind the front line, it's more than 30 kilometers. So this is this approximately. Of course, I'm not saying that the Russians were attacking from this territory, but obviously, even if we calculate the distance from this area to, let's say, the combat line, it's around 21 kilometers. And obviously, we understand that the Russians are not going to keep their artillery system right in the trenches of in 100 meters from Ukrainian positions, obviously. So, as I understand, based on geolocations and footage and all these things, we can make a conclusion that the Russians started using the Koalitsiya SV artillery system first on the Donetsk direction, and obviously, the Russians will try to use this system to hunt maybe even Ukrainian Abrams that also appeared in this direction. So we see that the clashes intensify in this area, and obviously both sides prepare some surprises for the final stage of the battle for the stronghold. Now we are moving to the southern direction to Krasnogorovka area, and today we got geolocation of Russian offensive operation along this tree line. On this video we can see the Ukrainian troopers who were withdrawing their positions, abandoning their positions, and a few moments after the Russians started artillery preparation, heavy bombing, and a few moments later we can see the Russian infantry who is moving to the same trenches and start clearing operation of this stronghold. So currently we have 100% geolocated confirmation of additional Russian progress on direction, and as a result of clashes, the Russians managed to establish control one of the biggest strongholds in this area. Now we see the entire configuration. During the previous days, if you remember, the Russians were attacking in this direction using armored vehicles and armored fist. Now we see the Russian progress along this trail line, and obviously we understand that the main Russian purpose and main Russian goal is to establish control over these intersections of the tree lines, which is the next target of the Russians. And if the Russians are able to do this, this is going to be complete collapse of Ukrainian defense belt, not just of Georgievka but also of Krasnogorivka, because from these positions the Russians will be able to answer and to get the operational space, and from this operational space the Russians can continue further offensive operation to the next stronghold. Also the Russians will be able to continue offensive operation in direction of the water reservoirs and lakes, to the natural barrier, let's say. And if this offensive develops successfully, then it's also possibilities to start sending reconnaissance and sabotage groups behind Krasnogorivka. When talking about Krasnogorivka itself, the same story. The Russians intensified publishing the videos of artillery bombings, of anti-tank missile strikes, of different types of weapon that they send in direction of the city. And mainly they are bombing, as you can see, the edge positions of the Ukrainians along the city, along the border of the city, like buildings, like mortar positions, I don't know, anti-tank positions, sniper positions, machine gun positions. So everything reminds us that very likely the Russians do have some plans. If we increase the numbers of days since the beginning of months, we're going to receive another geolocation in the same area. So another building on the edge, on the border of the village, of the city. So very likely the Russians do have some plans, and we need to expect that within the next days the Russians will launch also full-scale another operation to bypass Krasnogorivka from behind, but only after they capture these two strongholds. When talking about Novomikhailivka, we got also updates. Once again, the Russians established complete control over the Ukrainian positions that located to the top, on the top of Novomikhailivka. Everything is under complete Russian FPV drone fire. Nothing can bypass this territory. The Ukrainians on the northern positions have been cut off from the mainland. There is no possibility to send reinforcements, to send supplies, support. Basically, this is something like operational encirclement, but with FPV drones. So the Ukrainians that have their positions here, somewhere here, currently are no longer available, have any support and supply from the mainland. Maybe some few squads, few groups can do some rotations, but when talking about the global statistic, global scope, these areas was cut off. If we increase the numbers of updates, we're gonna see the full picture. A lot of geolocations were published recently, so we expect that also after a few more days of such activity, the Russians will start the ground operation as well. When talking about Ugledar, Avdiivka tactical bridge, nothing important happened. Interesting updates are coming from Robotyne. Today, the president of Ukraine, Zelensky, published the video that he visited Robotyne, as he says, zero line. Today, according to him, he visited the positions of 65th Mechanized Brigade inside of the village. He brought some, I don't know, medals. He maybe gave those medals, the awards, to people on the zero line. And of course, we can't check whether it's true or not. The Ukrainian propaganda says that he was in Robotyne. The Russian specialists and military experts are saying that it was a fake update, that Zelensky he couldn't enter Robotyne due to very big problems and too big risks of that. And they were saying that maybe Zelensky visited Orechov, maybe he was there. I don't know. If you ask my opinion, I believe that whether Zelensky, asking me whether Zelensky managed to enter or not, I believe that this is, let's say, I think that there are more chances that he made this video somewhere in Orechov and tried to show this as a visit of Robotyne, and I have my own reasons to think so, and I'll explain to him. First of all, and the main reason, that few hours before Zelensky visited Robotyne, according to him, the Russian sources published the video of Babry a few hours before, at 10, let's be more precise, at 10:30 a.m. of the local time, how Babry, as a result of FPV drone strike, destroyed another, let's say, armored vehicle, or not armored vehicle, another group of Ukrainians somewhere here, or maybe some positions. So and this video was published not because of Zelensky and Robotyne. It was completely separate video published during even the previous night. It was just added on at 10:30 a.m. But the most important of this video is that this road, the main road T0408 between Novodanilivka, Orechov and Robotyne, is under complete FPV drone control. Complete FPV drone control. There are no chances to anything to bypass, and obviously Zelensky was moving not in a regular light car. He was moving probably, and when talking about the video, he is moving, as you can see, in personnel armored car, maybe Bradley or something like Striker, and very unlikely and that the target of such type could bypass this territory being invisible. And the military experts, for example, from the situation on the ground, are saying that the Ukrainians do have possibility to use transport, to use vehicles, but somewhere to this line, and everything that below this line, the Ukrainians need to use their own fleets to get Rabotina on or Verbove. So then using the fields, the Ukrainians can send infantry to Rabotina, and using the same fields they can send infantry to Verbove, because if you remember, for the previous few months, we haven't received even a single video of Ukraine armored vehicles, some among the fields. The Ukraine stopped using this. And the distance, for example, in the first case is around, let's say, 6 kilometers. The Ukrainians need to waste using their own fleets, and Verbova, it's around 8 kilometers. I don't think that Zelensky, the president of Ukraine, was moving through the fields for another 8 kilometers. Very unlikely something like this happened today. But anyway, this is another video to show Ukrainian soldiers about the situation, that Zelensky is the real commander, that Zaluzhny, since the beginning of the special military operation, have never done like this. He hasn't visited Chasov Yar, he hasn't visited Avdiivka, he wasn't in Rabotina, and anyway, and Zelensky, as you can see, visited every single, let's say, town or the city on the zero line, which later was captured by the Russians. I don't know. Now we're moving to Kherson direction. We have a few details, interesting updates from this territory as well. The Ukrainian sources, the Russian sources, published the video of drone flying above the ruins of what left from the village, and the most important part, that the drone was flying above the area of possible Ukrainian landing operation. Maybe the Russian authorities, Russian commanders watched military summary when we were talking about the possible foothold, so that's why they took a decision to double check and send the entire FPV drone reconnaissance operation to discover whether a foothold there or not. And according to this video, probably they let's say confirmed that there are no foothold anymore, or maybe it was. The Russians were filming this territory during the daylight, so very likely the Ukrainians were hiding in the basements. But anyway, once again, strange story. The Ukrainian reconnaissance drone was flying exactly above this territory, exactly above the territory that we were talking a few days ago, possible area of Ukrainian second foothold in Krynki. We got a few geolocations. If you remember, there were geolocations of clashes inside of the village. There were geolocations, if you remember, a few days ago, of barge entering this territory. So we continue keeping our eye on this territory, but for now continue without any changes on the ground. But maybe we will adjust the map and show the gray zone. Now we are moving back. Let's start back. We go to let's say Bakhmut-Artyomovsk direction. The Russians continue offensive operation in the vicinity of Klishchiivka. Few more geolocations and published of bombings and attacks with FPV drones of Ukraine positions on 215.7 hill. The clashes in this area continues. The Russians established control over the farm, and there was a video of Russian offensive in direction of Klishchiivka itself, in direction of the railway station, but nothing special. When talking about Bogdanovka, we got the video how the Russians managed to discover Ukraine FPV drone operator Baba Yaga, and they followed the track, the movement of a drone, and then they bombed the position of this of operator, which is of course significant result for the special military operation. Sometimes I have a feeling that it's much more important to find the operator of Baba Yaga drone than to find even HIMARS, because operators of Baba Yaga can deal much more damage than even HIMARS. When talking about Bogdanovka itself, the clashes continues. The Russians continue destroying the buildings inside of the village without any progress on the operation on the ground. When talking about Liman direction, the sources confirms the Russian further progress in this area and the collapse of 95th Brigade. The sources are saying that the Ukrainians started removing of this brigade to the mainland, that this brigade lost its combat capabilities, and they started replacing this brigade with 13th Brigade Khartitsa. Other Russian sources reported about additional progress in direction of Yampolovka and Terny, and according to the Russian sources, now this approximately the progress of the Russian forces in let's say Liman Terny direction. This is the progress. We are not going to change the map, let's say, because we don't have any geolocated proofs of that. But anyway, the progress is significant, and we can't tell anything, we say anything about this. When talking about Kupiansk direction, another Ukrainian general arrived in Kupiansk. We're talking about Syrsky. He arrived after the Ukrainians were defeated in the vicinity of Tabaevka, Kislovka, Kotlerovka. He arrived to give let's say, to inspect the situation, and he ordered to reinforce Tabaevka, Krakhmalna area, and he ordered to send additional reserves to stabilize the front line in Kislovka, Kotlerovka, Pishane area. But when talking about the Russians, we haven't received even a single update about any Russian attempts to continue their offensive operation further. The situation probably was stabilized, or the Russians are regrouping for further activity on this direction. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds we condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.